Hey improvement nerds, welcome back to another episode. Today we're diving into a training methodology called Training Within Industry, or TWI. Imagine a method so powerful it helped an entire nation ramp up production during World War II, taught complex skills to a brand new workforce, and later became a foundational tool for Toyota's production success. So whether you're leading a team, training employees, or just looking to wage war on bad processes, you're in for a treat. Today we're joined by Mark Warren, a lean and process improvement expert with decades of experience, who's here to show us how TWI can transform modern organizations by putting people at the center of improvement. So let's dive in and discover how TWI can turn your team into a powerhouse of efficiency and skill. Today, we have a very special guest joining us. No matter what industry or organization you're in, we hope that you'll find this conversation valuable. We're diving into something called Training Within Industry, or TWI for short. It's a method that's been around since the 1940s, but it's incredibly relevant today. It comes in handy when you're training employees or trying to just improve processes. And to help us understand it better, we have Mark Warren with us. Mark is an expert in the field of lean and process improvement. He has decades of experience working with companies around the world. Mark, thank you for being here today. Is there anything you want to add to that introduction about yourself that I might have missed?
No, that's fine.
All right. Some humility there. I like that. Let's just get started. For those in the audience who may not be familiar with training within industry, could you explain maybe what it is and why it's such an important part of improving business processes today?
So training within industry is also known as TWI. And a lot of people ask me right up front, what's such a curious name? And the founders wanted to differentiate from an industrial perspective, the difference between like the community college, the trade schools. And so this is training within industry rather than an outside training program. Now, it was originally developed to help the U.S. industry ramp up for World War II. And we had a dire need. A lot of people were off to war. We had been in a depression for a decade. Businesses were running on a shoestring, sort of thing. So you had a tremendous number of industries having to ramp up. We were starting companies from scratch. We were converting companies that were running one product to another product. So you had a very high pressure for management in general, and they needed all the support they could get.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think what I've heard about TWI, maybe you can confirm this, is just that, like you said, during World War II, our workforce was basically shipped overseas, and that left those who weren't in the workforce having to learn super complicated jobs. The women had to come in and learn very complicated things and execute on those to basically help us have an advantage in the war and ultimately win the war. Do you see it that way?
In general, you didn't see any women in industry except in the front office. So you had a massive problem there. On top of that, when you're starting from scratch or doubling or tripling your headcount overnight almost, where do you get the leaders? Where do you get the supervisors? And so that was a major vacuum that the top leaders of the industry had to try to fill. And so they were scrambling. That's just to put it bluntly.
That's interesting. So this training within industry has been around since the 1940s, but it seems to have withstood the test of time. What is it about TWI that makes it so relevant in maybe modern work environments?
So to a large degree, Toyota takes a lot of credit for bringing the TWI back into the mainstream from a management perspective. They used the programs as the foundation for helping to build their production system and making them a world leader.
Do you know if Toyota still uses TWI as a framework for training?
So they use the job instruction as basically an entry point. And so this is the foundation for them to define their standard work inside of a factory. if you have a new product or a new line that has to be done, you have your manufacturing engineers basically design the processes, and then they get the supervisors or the team leaders and team managers out and work with the people to actually create how you're going to do the job. And the critical piece is when you're doing the job breakdowns, you're defining very clearly each step, but also the key points, which are critical to quality and productivity and safety.
Yeah, I like that. I think there's the big miss in a lot of organizations today is that not even standardizing their work. And in the off chance that they do, they don't have a good training methodology to train to that standard to then audit and hold the workforce accountable. So I really appreciate the bandwidth that WI has. And I know TWI has three main components. It has what we call the JI, JM, JR. So job instruction, job methods, and job relations. Could you briefly walk us through what each of those are and how they work together to improve operations?
Okay, so most companies start with job instruction. That's where Toyota started with it. So the job instruction on the surface looks like just a training tool, but there it has four skills inside job instruction. And the very first one is you're trying to get team leader to go through and look at their department and define exactly what the people do. So I can clearly define what needs to be done, what my barriers are. So it's a learning to see kind of a strategic practice piece. The next is the actual breaking down the job inside job instruction, which forces you to look very closely at what is actually done in the job. And so if you're having quality issues, almost always you either missed a key point or the people are not following the key point in a particular step, which generates your quality issues.
Mhm.
Then you have the way of training, which seems time intensive at first, but you can dramatically cut down the learning curve. So you can get employees up to speed. So where you have an operation where you say, oh, it's going to take me 6 weeks to get employee up to speed where they can run fairly independently, what's it worth to you to do it in a week? And this is what the job instruction allows you to do in this fairly intensive training methodology. And the last piece is actually more of a coaching piece from a leadership perspective inside job instruction. And the next program that most people do is job relations. And superficially, it looks like a, a way to solve people problems. And it is both a reactive and proactive type program. So on the reactive side is like, what do you do when you have a problem? It's teaching you to go get the facts, how to analyze it, create experiments. So it's scientific thinking in the reactive side. How do you handle a problem? On the proactive side, it is showing you kind of four core things to do that are good management skills that actually reduce the friction that often shows up between the employee and manager. And the last one is the job methods. And you cannot effectively do the job methods program until you've clearly defined the work with job instruction and you've removed a lot of the barriers or you understand what your problems are with the job relations point. And so once you know what your barriers are, then you have a very structured method to challenge and develop improved methods.
I love that it has this three-legged stool. Even if there's organizations that have standard work, they may provide instructions in some sort of way, but maybe miss out on the job relations piece and bringing it back to the human part of learning and then extending past that to improving. I love the way this breaks it down so you understand And to your point, we can alleviate quality issues if they understand the work better. We recognize some good coaching techniques within job relations that puts the trainee at the center of the universe with the training, and then the job methods and how they can engage, or we can engage them in improving the work. So
Yep.
that's awesome. And it does sound maybe front loaded or heavy at the beginning. Maybe some organizations will say, well, we don't have time to invest in doing this. But I think to your point, this actually reduces training time, because a lot of organizations will train with their employees, but then end up having to retrain and retrain. So they're not really capturing all those costs of having to go back and do it over. And it seems like with TWI, there's a good understanding once they've gone through these components of TWI, we know that they know the job. Go ahead.
Well, let me add a little bit to that. So
Yeah.
the quality piece, yeah, is critical. I need the JR, I need the problem solving, fact finding loop inside JR to actually get enough facts to solve the problems.
Mm.
But the other piece is upfront, the JR really pressures the leader to realize that they're going to, all of their results that they get in their company are through people. So you have to recognize there's a people side to an organization and management and the leadership piece. So they really work together.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen any other kind of training that really puts people at the center of it. And whether that's training or in improvement, we like to say with the Green Dot Group that we have a human centered approach to improvement. So this really ties in nicely.
The other piece is, a lot of companies say, oh, we have so much training costs. There's a group I'm working with in Europe. It's an aerospace company, and they are tracking that once they started using the JI program to do the training, not only did that reduce their lead time to train people on critical tasks, but the HR said, okay, I need to bring 100 people in. So I want to interview and line up, say 120, because I know in 3 months I'm going to lose a percentage of them. And so what they were finding is by helping the new employee get to success quicker, they had a far lower rate of abandonment of the job. So the number of people that they had to actually train dropped dramatically.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think I've actually experienced the same exact thing with TWI in manufacturing. We had in one place, we had a high turnover rate, and we implemented TWI. And previously we would just sit big book in front of them and then just have them sign off that they've read this book to operate machinery. And then we introduced TWI, and they went through the important steps, the key points, and the reason why they do what they do for the machine. And we would go through several audits with them, and we'd kind of bring out leadership to maybe add some pressure or just show off TWI. But the confidence that it gave the worker was just amazing. And leadership would walk away with this seemingly making a difference in this person's life because they're just understanding the work better. And we found out that we had a better rate of retention within the organization after deploying that.
So you brought out bringing out the leaders. And it's an interesting point that there are the tens of thousands of companies that have tried the TWI programs. There are two different, fairly distinct groups. Ones that try it and don't do so well, and those that try it and get dramatic improvements and good returns on investment. And one of the key points, the ones that have the very good returns and the very good results, is the people who learn the skills and practice the skills. These companies started with the leaders learning it and practicing it and beginning to pick up the habits in the structure of how they make decisions, how they train people on things, their expectations, how they can set aside or define very clearly roles and responsibilities, that sort of thing. So this is something that was recognized in midway through the TWI program during the war period, but also Toyota did it in C-suite and down. The top people went through all the programs before the frontline supervisors did.
Great example of leadership.
Yep. So it looks like a training program, but it's a leadership development program.
And it probably works at every level of the organization, leadership at every level, and leads on down to the frontline staff and how they approach their work. So it seems like it's more of a strategy than just an add-on component to a business.
Yep. So the companies that I have worked for where the top management sees this and starts incorporating it, you always see the top managers change some of their behaviors. And in changing the behaviors, you see kind of a waterfall or trickle down effect inside the management organization where the behaviors of management and leadership change and you get the employees far more engaged.
Yeah, it's amazing how a training methodology can be so transformative. And that's probably why it worked well within Toyota.
Right. So you see JI still inside Toyota. The JR program, they actually blended it into, they modernized a number of things and they blended it in the mid 90s. Their growth was so rampant in the 50s that within 5 years after taking the JM program on, and the job methods program is actually a industrial engineering light with no engineering nomenclature. And so the growth was so rampant inside Toyota, they needed a stronger program. But they did absorb all of the JM into their systems and their tools. But you won't see it directly inside Toyota if you were looking for it.
We would see the JI portion is what you're saying?
Oh, no, you see the JI, but you won't see the JM. The JR was integrated into their respect for people that
Yep.
came directly out of the job relations. So the job relations has been merged into Toyota's way of doing business. The job methods was integrated and absorbed in basically and a industrial engineering program was added into the Toyota production method. So the Toyota Kaizen is nothing more than job methods.
Right. How do we improve our work?
Right.
And this training methodology, you wouldn't say that this is just limited to manufacturing or the assembly line, but it would be for every industry and every organization and every functional area within every organization. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes, if you think about it, every organization is created to deliver some product or service, which then you have some process sequence that you're flowing through step by step. It always involves people. So there's always communication issues. How do you communicate something clearly? Job instruction. Job instruction truly forces you to think through step by step. What are you expecting that person to do? So you could actually begin to grow as a leader from a supervisor or manager position by learning how to clearly define your expectations. And the best way I have seen is doing the job breakdown. Use that same structure, do an outline of your expectations.
Yeah, exactly. Just a thought with all the advancements in technology and automation, how does TWI fit in today's fast paced work environment? Can companies blend Toyota with modern practices to stay competitive? Is that kind of what Toyota has done?
So yes, you can blend it. If I jump over to the computer science, early on, I think back in the 50s or 60s, we had a saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Mhm.
In Industry 4.0, you're adding not only just the computer, but you're beginning to do some machine learning, AI, that sort of thing. If you do not have the process, debugged and smooth, all you're going to do is just speed up your ability to create scrap, report, that sort of thing.
We'll automate waste.
Yep. So yeah, we're automating waste.
Now, if someone's listening to this podcast and they wanted to dive deep into TWI and start applying it, what would you suggest they do, or where would you suggest they begin? Are there any resources and steps they should follow up with?
So if a company wants to integrate the TWI materials, generally I would recommend starting with JI. But at the high level, top management needs to say, okay, what is my objective? What am I trying to solve? What do I think it's going to solve for me? So you have to integrate it into your current system. So there's kind of an adopt and adapt cycle of bringing an additional program into the company. And the next piece would be is like, okay, if you think it's good for you, top management lets you learn some of the pieces, look at it a second time, and then say, okay, how many people need to be trained on the program? How am I going to set aside sufficient time for the people to practice, to get up to speed on using the skills? And can I create an environment that's going to allow people to experiment, to develop those skills? So there's actually some materials available that can walk you through picking out strategically how to integrate it into your current needs.
That's great. I love that approach. You have a very higher level of success with making sure that the top executives of the organization have a plan and an outline and some grace for the RAM to be installed. So that is really good to work into their strategy. You mentioned some resources. Do you have any specifics on resources, or where they could, like, any good books that they can look up, or manuals, or?
Okay, so all three of the standard programs are actually structured. And this is one of the things that the TWI service developed as they realized they wanted all the trainers who delivered the programs to be very consistent. So it's basically a scripted program. It's 10 hours, 2 days, 2 hours a day for 5 days over a week. A outside trainer can do 2 groups over a week. If you're an inside trainer, being like company trainer, I recommend the company trainer do only 1 group per week or one every other week. And once you give the team leads the training, you spend the balance of the time actually coaching on the floor to help them use the training in their actual day-to-day work. So you've got to make the training useful for the supervisor. Otherwise, it's just another duty that they have to do. And they got their fingers crossed and hoping that this was just program of the month and this too will go away. So the support that you do is very effective. I've actually written a book for the trainers. It's called JI Trainer's Guide. And I have a book for the delivery. I'm willing to share those freely as a PDF. If you're a history nerd, I could give you the history as well. The TWI service there last year put together a history of what they had accomplished. That's available as a reprint. One of the leaders who actually founded the American Management Association ended up retiring and then acting as a mentor to a group that ran the TWI program in New Zealand for nearly 20 years. And so the New Zealand group continued the development, and they have an extensive outline about how to roll it out inside of a company.
I appreciate the parallels between how to strategically roll this out within an organization and how that parallels rolling out lean initiatives within an organization. You have to be really strategic about it and make sure it's not just a flavor of the month, and make sure there's some commitment up front to follow through and commit to do what is necessary to make it successful throughout all levels of the organization. I appreciate you offering your resources. I'm sure some of our listeners may reach out to you for some of that.
So one of the things when you mentioned about the rolling out the lean and some of the lean failures is I was quite shocked to find that 70 years ago, the TWI service uncovered the same fundamental reasons why rolling out or trying to integrate a program into a company fails as we have found inside the lean organizations. So it's like we didn't know what our grandparents had done, and we're just having to learn the same problems or face the same barriers over and over. So we've got some, step-by-step outlines about what works. Even though technology has changed dramatically, we're still working with people.
Yeah. Yeah. If we don't understand history, we're doomed to repeat it.
Well, I mean, a lot of people think of me as a historian, but I have dug into the history predominantly to try to peel back the layers and understand how, like Giona, why were they so successful inside Toyota? And try to actually replicate that success in modern companies, which we have done. I've got a company that I worked with that over a 5-year period has increased productivity by a factor of 10. And they were considered a lean showcase when I started working with them. So they already had all the lean tools out there and they're really good. But then we started using the TWI programs and explaining about how to create flow inside their company. And they have increased their productivity dramatically. The number of products actually produced every year, it's using the same footprint. They didn't enlarge the buildings at all. And they've increased their headcount by about 10 or 15%. That's significant. So it can be done today. You don't have to go back and read Toyota's history between 50 and 55, where they increased productivity by a factor of 10. It can be done today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real head scratcher why every organization doesn't just do this. I've been in organizations where we've deployed it, both TWI and lean, and able to reduce cycle time to really capitalize on our real estate, made the companies way more profitable. Engagement scores go way up. So you just see a ton of benefits when you apply this correctly. So yeah, it's a wonder why every organization just doesn't do it.
That's a good way to ask. And why not?
Well, I appreciate you taking your time today. Is there one key message that you'd want our listeners to take away about TWI and its impact on building sustainable, high performance organizations as we depart?
I would say management often is looking for a silver bullet that they can just buy something off the shelf and hand it to their staff and have it work. But what I find is when management truly goes through the programs and starts thinking, there's a lot of introspection of this. And you will find over a few months, your behaviors as a manager will change. And you as the manager have far more impact on the performance of your organization than you realize.
Indeed. Yeah, that's great stuff. Mark, I sure appreciate you taking some time out of your day today to be with us and be on the podcast. Super excited about training within industry and TWI. Again, we would love to see more organizations get involved with both lean and TWI for the success of their organization. Putting people at the center of improvement, putting people at the center of their training is always a good thing. And that's what makes highly successful companies successful, in my opinion. So thank you so much again. And hope to be hearing from you sometime in the future.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Mark.
And that's a wrap, improvement nerds. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into training within industry and got a fresh perspective on how TWI can build stronger teams and smoother processes. A big thank you to Mark Warren for sharing his expertise
and showing us how this methodology continues to make an impact decades after it began. If you have any questions about TWI or want to learn more, drop us a line. We'd love to help you out on your journey. Until next time, keep nerding out, keep improving, and remember to leave your processes better than you found them.